Hi lovely people, it's Helen and it's so lovely to be sat here chatting with you again after so long. I think it's been about a year since I last filmed a video, and what a crazy, unexpected, life-changing, history-altering year it's been. I hope you're doing well despite everything that's going on. So a lot of this year was my final year of university, and because of all the work that surrounds finals and then suddenly the pandemic, of course, I had no idea what was going on, no way to prepare sort of content, and then it just ended up being not really filming anything for a while. So I'm really sorry that it's been so long. A lot of things have changed in my life. I've graduated university, I'm starting a new job, lots of exciting things like that I just wanted to update you on, and also give you a bit of an idea of the kind of videos I'm hoping to be making in the future. So when making this video, I've been thinking how I want to kind of structure everything because there's so many little things to talk about. I thought it might be best to just kind of start at the beginning of the year and just talk through everything that's happened. So starting off in January, I started the year in my final year of university, living with two of my best friends in a college-owned flat. And it was really lovely. I think this year has probably been the best year in terms of living situation. The flat was really nice, newly refurbished, all white walls and new furniture and those sort of things, which I really liked. I really enjoyed living with my two friends. We got along really well, everything was really smooth in terms of like sharing kitchen together, that sort of thing, and also because they studied the same or similar subjects to me, it meant that our courses overlapped a lot. We went to a lot of the same classes together, we shared the same tutors, and our schedules just in general were very similar, which always makes things a little bit smoother when living together, because it means that we left the house at the same time, we ate dinner at the same time-ish together, and we all sort of enjoyed doing the same things. So going to the pub mainly and having half-price pizza. We loved doing that, it was so fun. And it was great living in college grounds again after living out in second year, because we were just so much nearer to everyone else in college. So it was really nice that our other friends were also really nearby. We could just kind of knock on their door and go to dinner together or go for a run, that sort of thing. So I really enjoyed where I was living in third year, and was so gutted that it was cut short for obvious reasons. So my last term at university, which was Hilary term, the second term of third year, most of it was spent kind of finishing up the courses that I still had left to learn for my finals exams, and then a few revision classes as well. So I mentioned running before, and I got really into running this year. It was one of my New Year's resolutions to run a half marathon because my sister Claire had just run one, and I really wanted to do it, just like a bucket list thing. So I signed up for a race in October and started training at the beginning of the year, got really into it. It was quite difficult to get into at first because I was a complete beginner. I had never really run at all before. I did a bit of sprinting back at school, but I never pegged myself for a long distance runner. But it always seemed like something that was so cool, and I really admired people who could run, and one of my close friends is a very good runner. So yeah, just started off with a few K at a time, built it up to running 5Ks pretty regularly, and I saw my pace slowly but surely getting faster, and it was so satisfying, and every day I just couldn't wait to get out the house. So I was really buzzing on that momentum of wanting to get faster and faster and just carry on training. What I found most difficult probably is sort of increasing my speed beyond what was really comfortable. I've heard from my running friends that you need to do sort of sprints or just short distances and really push yourself for those short distances, but I found that really difficult to motivate myself to do. The only thing that really got my speed up a little bit was running on a treadmill on the days that it was too rainy to run outside, and just because I set the treadmill a little bit faster than my usual pace, it meant that I could get my pace up and get my strides longer and those sort of things. So a little bit of a tangent there, but yes, I got quite into running at the beginning of the year, which was really clutch for when lockdown happened, but I'll get into that later. So at the beginning of the year, sort of January, February time, I feel like a lot of people in the UK didn't see the pandemic coming, but I have a lot of family in Wuhan. In fact, that's where my mum's from, and that's where my grandpa is at the moment and was there throughout the whole sort of pandemic really hitting Wuhan. So there were definitely feelings of sort of anxiety and worry for my family who were in China at the time, because I had a sort of idea of what was yet to come when it came to leaving university at the end of Hilary term. we had the choice of leaving everything in college for the first time because we were living in this college-owned flat. And I was really excited about that because I didn't want to move everything back every term like we always had to for the last few years. But just in that split second, I thought, you know, I feel like there's a chance I won't be coming back to university. So we decided to just clear my room just in case. And turned out, yeah, we went into lockdown pretty soon after university ended for the term. So that was a good decision. So now we're around March time and I just arrived home from university, just unpacked a few of my things, and then there were rumours flying around about how the UK was going to go into lockdown soon. So George had gone home back to Bristol and I'd gone home back to London. We were living apart as we usually do during the vax, and very last minute we decided that we didn't want to do lockdown away from each other because we guessed it might be for quite a long time. I was feeling really stressed at the time. It was sort of the height of my revision for my finals, which were massively uncertain. We didn't know if finals will still go ahead, what format they'll be taking, all those sort of things, and I was feeling pretty behind with a lot of my work, so I was really quite stressed and really wanted his support there. So very last minute, I think it was like the day or 2 days before lockdown was announced, we decided to quarantine together. So George drove down from Bristol to London and I hastily packed my things. I didn't pack nearly enough at all for how long lockdown ended up lasting. I basically just prioritised my work, my textbooks, my laptop, chargers, that sort of thing, and didn't really think about clothes at all. So I was pretty much wearing the same jeans every single day, but that's okay, not important. It's just, yeah, in hindsight, if I'd known how long lockdown would be, I would have packed a little bit more sensibly. I ended up staying at George's for a few months. I spent most of the time revising, of course, because I still had my finals to sit. His family were nice enough to set me up with my own sort of study space. George had an extra monitor, so I had my little study set up and just locked myself in that room most days. George's home was actually a really nice place to spend lockdown during a time when we weren't really allowed out much except to sort of walk and run and exercise. He lives in what I, as someone from the city, would call a countryside, but he would call a town. There's lots of fields and woods to walk through, lots of trees and grass, which is just unheard of in London. No, I'm joking, but it was a very nice place to be staying. And he lives by the sea and he has a pet dog, so that led to a lot of really lovely walks and just lots of fresh air, which really helped the lockdown experience. I tried really hard to keep up running, especially during the days when we were only allowed outside once a day for exercise, but his local area really tested my running ability. He lives in quite a hilly place, so I was really working my leg muscles to kind of get up those hills, and I probably went a little too hard with the running because I did end up injuring my knees a little bit, and they're still a bit messed up now. Probably need to go to the physiotherapist and get that checked out. So I did definitely try to keep up running during lockdown, but it did taper off, and I got lazier and lazier. I like to excuse myself and say that revision got more busy, which it did, but yeah, I kind of almost regret not keeping up the momentum that I had back at university for running, but I guess that's easier said than done, especially when I had other kind of conflicting priorities. And yeah, if I'm being really honest, it was pretty difficult to keep up the resilience for revising for my finals as well. At that time, you know, everything was changing with the pandemic and no one really knew what was going to happen next, and the universities were definitely not an exception there. We didn't know if we were going back to university for final term. We didn't know if our finals were going ahead, what format they'll take, when they'll be. There were ideas of like a safety net being floated, but we weren't told by our department until maybe a few weeks before our finals, so time was just ticking on and I didn't know what to revise for. I didn't know kind of what format of revision to take. So I was feeling really stressed at this time, just with all the uncertainty, every day waking up, checking my emails, oh no, they haven't said anything yet. And I think it was mainly that uncertainty that caused so much anxiety. And on top of that, missing my family, being away for so long and not knowing when it sort of ended. Also, I really love George's family, but it is difficult being a sort of guest in someone else's house. It is always inevitably going to be slightly different to just living at home with your own family. So all these different things took a bit of a toll on my mental health. I had some really low days during that sort of period. There were some days when I couldn't get out of bed, some days when I got out of bed and just went for a walk, and I think this period was really important for me, and I learnt quite a few things that I probably wouldn't have learnt otherwise, such as the fact that sometimes it's more important to look after yourself rather than be productive with the day, whether that's taking a long walk or cooking an elaborate dinner that just passes the time away. I found myself needing to come up with these new coping strategies to deal with the stress and anxiety that I know a lot of people were feeling during this time. So yeah, it was a difficult year, and I know so many people had it far more difficult than I did, but I hope you guys are all okay and you are all okay during this lockdown period. Moving on to around June time, it was just before my final exams and lockdown restrictions had just lifted, so I moved back to London to sit my exams because I knew that having the support of my family would be really helpful during this stressful time. George really kindly decided to come with me, so he spent a few months at mine after I spent a few months at his. And I have to say, George's support throughout the whole year has been absolutely amazing. He's been by my side throughout a lot of really difficult times, and I cannot thank him enough for that. So it was a few weeks to my final exams when we found out the format of what our exams would be. And usually we have 8 exams, one for each module, each one lasting about 3 hours, and the average of the score would end up being our final grade, or determine what our final grade would be. This year, instead, they decided for the exams to be open book, which is of course really helpful because it means we didn't have to learn the names and the dates of all those sources that we'd be using. But at the same time, possibly isn't as useful as it would be in other subjects, because I study economics and management. It's quite an essay-based subject, and a lot of the things that you'd be writing about, all the analysis, open book doesn't really help with that, so I ended up revising in much the same way that I would have before. Also, our department introduced a safety net, so instead of our 8 modules, our 8 papers being averaged to create our final score, they'd just take the top 6 and average them. So 2 papers, we still had to pass them, but if they didn't go too well, they wouldn't factor into our final grade, which for me was a huge relief because there were 2 subjects in particular that I was feeling a little bit uncertain about. Just didn't know how I would perform in the actual exam. There was a chance of it going well, but also a chance of it really not going well. So it took a huge stress off me that I finally knew sort of what format the exam was going to be in, and also what our safety net policy would be. Overall, I was pretty happy with my department, other than the kind of long delay that they took to tell us anything, which caused a lot of anxiety. I feel like the decision they came to in the end was relatively fair, and now seeing the results that a lot of my friends got, I think everyone's pretty happy with their results. I don't think anyone felt necessarily shortchanged. I think everyone got the grade that they expected or even higher, which is great to hear. So it's nice to know that for our subject, at least from the people that I know, we weren't necessarily too harmed by the pandemic in terms of the results that we got at the end. I know this wasn't the case for everyone, but on the whole I thought that the department did a relatively good job in handling the situation despite the initial delays. However, this can't be said about every department at Oxford. George's department, the physics department, I felt has not handled the situation well. So instead of sitting the exams like almost every subject did during the summer remotely, they decided to postpone the exams so that they could be sat in person at the beginning of Michaelmas term, so that's around October, which was pretty short-sighted, which I guess is easy for me to say now in December, knowing how the pandemic has progressed in the UK. I'm jumping ahead now, but I'll quickly explain what happened with George's exams. Surprise, surprise, they ended up being remote and he sat them in his university bedroom. There was basically no safety net. I mean, the safety net is that you can't fail, which I guess would be a big relief if you're on the boundary of passing and failing. But for the majority of people, it didn't really change what grade they'd get, whether that's a first, a 2-1, a 2-2. I think a lot of people in George's department felt pretty shortchanged by the end result. I mean, there I guess was some reason to postpone the exams if they would have been in person, but since they were remote anyway, all they've achieved is this strange gap of time when I guess people weren't sure whether they should be revising or taking their summer early, since they would be revising later in the summer. I mean, George, for example, he was ready to sit his exams back in May, but because they were postponed for so many months, it meant that you either forget something or you revise right up until your new exam dates, which meant you're super burnt out, you haven't had a summer, you haven't had a break, and then you're starting the new academic term on this sort of burnt out note, which isn't ideal either. What he ended up doing was taking his summer earlier, so around May, June, when term would have still been going on, and then ended up working from August onwards for his exams in October, which made sense. But I think he feels like he forgot some things that he knew really, really well back when exams were meant to be in the summer. So maybe hasn't done as well as he could have done, although we have no idea yet because it's been a few months and his department still haven't given them any results, which has then knock-on effects about applying for jobs next year. That's a whole nother story. This has turned into a massive tangent, but I think it's always interesting to hear how other universities have dealt with this sort of pandemic situation, and that was my little explanation about how two departments in Oxford handled it very differently to each other. Also, one thing that Oxford introduced as a sort of university-wide thing, they opened the opportunity to graduate without honours to everyone, which usually is reserved for people who can't sit their finals for whatever reason it is. They opened this opportunity to everyone, and this was called a DDH, so you graduate with a deemed to have deserved honours, and that status would be accompanied with a sort of thorough description from your tutor about how you were as a student and the grade you were expected to achieve had you sat your exams. Being really honest, I strongly considered this option. I spoke with my tutor on several occasions to discuss kind of the pros and cons of going down this route. In the end, it was my tutor who encouraged me to sit my exams anyway, and sort of let go of any pressures I was putting on myself to do well. And once I sort of made my peace with that, it did become easier to just sort of enjoy the exams. I mean, exams are never fun, but I actually do really enjoy my subject and I find it really interesting. And because they're essays and a lot of sort of analysis and discussion, the way I approached my exams in the end was just to have fun with it, like get really interested in the question that's being asked and really explore that in a way that I found interesting. I ended up sitting all my exams and I finished them. So George was there, my sisters were there, my mum and dad were there, and as I walked out of my little room in the annex, they sprayed me with champagne and trashed me just like they would in Oxford.
Cold water. Oh, no, that ruined it.
And I live pretty near the River Thames, so we ran to the river and Claire egged me on to jump into the river, which I did. It was freezing, but so much fun, and just this relief washed over me when that pressure of exams was over. I am really proud of myself that I decided to sit the exams and sort of push through the difficulties. And that's not to say that pushing through is always the right choice, but in this particular situation, I am proud of myself for getting through the exams. Hi, it's Editing Helen here, and I realised that I never mentioned how my exams went or what grade I got at the end of it. So I'm really excited to tell you that I actually got a high 2-1 at the end of everything, which was so unexpected, and I am so happy. I honestly didn't expect to do so well with everything that was going on, so I am so happy with my results, and I am really grateful for everyone that supported me throughout my exams. So if you're watching this, you know who you are. Thank you so much for your support. And also, when looking over the footage for this video, I realised that I spoke for far too long. The video is quite long now, so I'm just going to end it here. I really hope you've enjoyed the video so far, and I'll be uploading the second part really soon, where I'll be talking about my job at the moment, my current living situation, and my plans for the future. So I can't wait to see you then. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.